Senator, sorry to interrupt you. We've only got about 6 minutes left with you here today, and I've got so many questions. MSNBC was deceitful. They lied about what your real views were. They tried all sorts of dirty tricks. They said, if you don't like Obamacare, you are a racist. We now learn that hundreds of millions of dollars from your father's even partial audit of our tax money went to General Electric and to MSNBC. How creepy is that to know that a government media source, like the Kremlin or something, went after you?
Well, and the weird thing about it also is that, I tell people that once upon a time our dollar was backed by gold until about 1971, at least partially. From 71 to about the year 2005, our dollar was backed by at least U.S. Treasury bills, debt. Wasn't the best thing in the world, but at least it was government debt. From about 2005 on, though, it's backed by, I guess, buying GE, MSNBC, backed by buying used car loans, basically backed by what the government calls toxic assets, things that you and I and no person with a rational investment mind would ever buy. We were forced to buy by the Federal Reserve buying it. But that's essentially what backs the U.S. dollar now. Toxic assets are now what we pyramid the dollar on, and that is worrisome.
Incredible. Dealing with the carbon tax, when you said, I've got a message from the Tea Party to Washington, we're going to stop you from this carbon tax. California went ahead with it. A 20% tax. They're already got over 30% unemployment, 60 Minutes reports. What are you going to do as a senator, sir, to try to aggressively block Obama from implementing his agenda by stealth through the EPA and FDA and other groups?
Yeah, that's one of my biggest fears, and one of the things that through the election I learned more about our government was that I was amazed and appalled to know how much the unelected bureaucrats are doing. And that basically if something fails in the Senate or in the House, they simply do it anyway through these bureaucracies. And so part of the reform agenda that I think the Tea Party stands for, one of the items that I will push for is sunsetting all regulations. Basically, if they pass a regulation, it has to be voted on in Congress by a certain period of time, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but it cannot just be put on the books by unelected bureaucrats. And really, we're in danger of having the government run by these standing bureaucracies. The Founding Fathers talked about standing armies. Now what we have is a standing bureaucracy that we need to fear, and we really need to have governmental reform. And that's a big thing that I'm going to be pushing as part of what I call the Tea Party platform.
Amazing. Senator, dealing with the TSA, we had your father, the honorable congressman and medical doctor from Texas, where I hail from. We had him on about 3 weeks ago, and it made national news on the Drudge Report and ABC News and other places. He hadn't really complained about it previously. He was against the TSA and it's groping and radiating people. But now the TSA is announcing they're going to continue sticking their hands actually in people's pants. They only grabbed him on the outside of the pants. And same thing happened to former Governor Ventura. Now the Indian ambassador says she'll never come back here again. That's in the news today. I mean, who runs things? The TSA and Homeland Security or the Congress? Plus, what are the feds doing, seizing control of transportation? Now they're expanding out to the roads. They're putting telescreens in Walmart with Napolitano, giving people orders. What's your take on all this Orwellian stuff, and what's your plan to deal with that?
Well, I think it's amazing that after 10 years, we still don't have a frequent flyer plan. It just shows you the incompetence of the federal government that, you know, my father flies twice a week. My brother-in-law flies 3 or 4 times a week. Why is there not some sort of voluntary program or private program where you could volunteer to have a little more background check, but do it voluntarily, and have a private group that you do it, and then you fly through the airport or walk through without obstruction? There's no reason why this couldn't be done, except for the government does not seem to be able to do anything in a logical fashion. And so instead of saying, well, let's investigate certain people who are flying in from certain countries, most of the danger, I think, and risk on the planes is people coming from other countries. So why don't we look at those folks, you know, look at the flight plan of who's coming to visit us from certain countries and do some investigation in advance of those folks. But I think we're wasting time on the millions and millions of Americans who aren't a threat. And when you waste so much time on those people, you don't have enough time to spend on the people who truly are a threat.
Well, Senator Rand Paul joining us live, only a minute or two left. They know that the American people aren't the threat, but the MIAC and Homeland Security report, again, your father, it said if you have a Ron Paul sticker, that's the enemy. Returning veterans, it was in the news yesterday that TSA's harassing our returning troops. I mean, you're being diplomatic, and I respect that, but what do you, I mean, in your gut, do you agree that this is just a federal power grab and they want to train us, normal citizens, to basically submit like we're criminals in a prison?
Well, I think the danger anytime you give a government agency so much power is that exactly what Rahm Emanuel said about government, let no crisis go wasted, let no crisis deter us, or, let's use those crises to go ahead and foment and use government to grow larger and larger. So, yeah, there is a danger, and what they do is they suck in some well-meaning people, and they want the power to say that it's going after terrorism, which none of us want terrorists to be allowed to attack our country. But in the process, we all get swooped up in it, and all of our liberties get infringed upon. And that's the real danger in these things. Mm-hmm. But it always works upon trying to show you something that is rational, something that people don't want to have happen. Nobody wants another terrorist attack. But in doing so, then everybody gets lumped in together, and our freedoms get, eroded and taken away.
Last question, sir. Obviously, there are a lot of Republicans, and like Boehner, who, it was in Bloomberg, was going to try to block your father getting the committee chairmanship that he was already supposed to get in seniority, and blocking so many others. He's a protege of Newt Gingrich, who supports global warming taxes and globalism. I'm not trying to get a fight going between Republicans, but we've seen former Senator Trent Lott brag in the news that, hey, we're going to co-opt all these new senators and House members. I would hope that if you do see the co-opting, that not only we know you won't sell out, we know that. You're honorable family, you're an honorable person, values are what matter, but hopefully you'll blow the whistle and truly lead and let us know about who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. We know Senator DeMint's good and a few others. What's your basic statement on that? I mean, are they already trying to pull you into the smoky rooms?
Well, I think what's interesting is that we've already had an impact, and we haven't even gotten up there. And I think they have heard the message, and you've heard some of them saying, you know what, we heard the message of the election. But the real devil is in the details, and of what these negotiations are, what happens behind closed doors. And I will do my utmost to shine light on that, but also to stand up in the Senate and say, this isn't what we're going to do. We have to do something about the debt, and we can't just keep spending money. So, yeah, I think you'll find that I will be a voice that will look for opportunities at every turn to try to slow down their agenda and also to correct things. And I think that that's not really been done in the past because so many of the people who get elected have been in office forever and ever. I've never been in office before, so I think it gives me a perspective where I haven't been beaten down by the system, and I go there really, truly with the belief that I can and want to be part of a movement that changes our country for the better.
Yes, sir. In closing, I know you've got to get back to patience. One caveat here. I know that we do need to cut spending. You've called for cutting defense. I believe you said by $100 billion. That's large. That's substantive. But also, don't we need to say no more bailouts? If somebody like Paulson comes down there again, like happened in October 2 years ago, and says we're going to have martial law, we're going to have collapse if you don't do this. I mean, what do we do at that point when they try to hold our financial system hostage again? I mean, what are you planning to do at that point?
Well, I think you need to have people who are brave enough and confident enough in their belief in freedom to stand up and say we can survive a bankruptcy, and also to point out that AIG's bankruptcy or lack of bankruptcy in their bailout basically wasn't bailing out just AIG. It was bailing out a lot of Wall Street bankers who had money in AIG, but also was bailing out a lot of foreign banks. So really a lot of this is just pointing out the truth and letting people know that. And I think people are very upset when they find out that, very, very wealthy inside bankers in New York as well as across the country and across the world benefited from average middle-class taxpayers like the rest of us having to send money to Washington to bail out AIG. But what they do is they all gang up and say, oh, it would be the end of the world if you don't do this. But my dad's always made a good point that all the people who said it would be the end of the world and that there would be a collapse of the economy were all the same people who didn't predict any of this coming. So we don't have to accept their word at face value, that we have to take their predictions as they were.